Provisioning when you're coastal cruising is a little bit different than provisioning for a great big stock up major passage being away from stores for a long time. But both of them actually have one thing in common, and that is figuring out what your provisioning barometer is. Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. I'm talking about provisioning for coastal cruising today, and really identifying that one key thing that you want to make sure you never run out of. All of this is part of a longer and larger topic about provisioning and really being confident in how you deal with food, whether you're talking about life on a boat or, frankly, even life on land. One of the things I love in life, actually, is talking to people about food and helping them get more confident in how they deal with it, with all aspects of it, from list making to planning to grocery shopping to storing it to cooking it. Some of those things matter specifically on a boat, but mostly it's all about food confidence, and it's all about being a self-sufficient galley. And whether your galley is floating or on land, a lot of the tricks are the same. If you're interested, there's a course I have called the Self-Sufficient Galley. There's a link for it in the show notes. I'm constantly updating it and love to help people get more confident around food. A big part of food is, of course, grocery shopping, or provisioning as we call it when we're cruising. And I've spent a lot of time talking about how you can stock up for long periods of time and long passages. But this summer, when we were cruising on Calypso, the 4-month shakedown that we did, it was really my first experience with coastal cruising. When you're provisioning for an adventure of going far and going to remote places, that means stocking up really hard. It means filling every single nook and cranny of the boat, buying not one box of pasta, but making sure you have 12 so that you're ready. And when your budget is tight and food costs twice as much when you hit the Bahamas, it's actually really smart to leave the United States loaded to the gills. And that's a hard mindset to break. That's been the way that we've cruised for the last few times that we've gone. And I kept wanting to load up the boat. I still keep wanting to load up the boat, even when we're coastal cruising in the United States, where groceries are fairly easy to come by. There is a little bit of a difference, though, and that is that, of course, when you load the boat down, your boat's not going to sail as well. So if you don't have to go loaded down, there's not much point in it. The second is, if you don't have as much stuff that you need to carry and stock up on, it means you can take advantage of having more fresh things. Sure, it means that you may have to hit the grocery store a little more frequently, but it does mean that instead of saying, okay, I'm going to be away from the grocery store for 2 months and therefore I need to make sure I have 40 pounds of onions and 4 cabbages, you can say, nope, I'm just going to buy the 3 pounds of onions and I know that I can have lettuce, and romaine lettuce will last for a couple of weeks, and I'm probably going to hit the grocery store within the next 2 weeks anyway. Which brings me to the main point of this particular podcast. And what I realized is that we had one particular item that was our trigger for making sure it was time to hit a grocery store. And that one trigger for us was half and half. We love half and half in our coffee. And sure, there are substitutes that we will use if we hit the point of needing to. You can use powdered milk. You can use cream. You can use evaporated milk, not condensed milk, which is super sweet, but just the canned evaporated milk. Once we're out of the States, we'll be able to get whole fat powdered milk, which does a better job. But those things absolutely are substitutes. But if we're coastal cruising and have the option of hitting grocery stores, we would really like to be able to have half and half, real half and half in our coffee. And we started to really figure out what we needed to have. And what I love thinking about is having one on the go and one in reserve. And then once we pull that one in reserve into the being on the go, then it's time to start looking for the next one. For us with half and half, we found our refrigerator is very small, but we find it much easier to store the pint size containers of half and half than the big quart size, even though we probably go through a quart about every 2 weeks. And so we go through a pint about every week. And what I would do is I'd actually stock up when we first sort of hit this idea and realized that this is what we do. And it was exacerbated by the fact that there was actually a half and half shortage in this country this summer. You can look it up. I've got a link in the blog post that is associated with this particular podcast. But there were a couple of times we went to grocery stores and the whole section of the grocery store where the half and half would be, it was empty. Every kind of coffee creamer that was in the cooler wasn't there. Anyway, but what we realized is that we can take 4 pint containers of half and half and stick it in the fridge. And that was kind of our starting point. And then as we went along, as soon as we pulled as soon as we had one in reserve and we had one on the go, because there was a half and half shortage, we started looking for half and half. And when we saw it, we could buy up to 3 more and have them in the fridge. And the ultra pasteurized will last a longer time than the fresh stuff. So we would do that. But that's my provisioning barometer. It's what I call it. It's the thing that I wanted to make sure that I didn't run out of. There are a number of other things that fit that list. And provisioning for coastal cruising means to me kind of being aware and having this idea of you've got one on the go and one in reserve. And then when you start using your one in reserve, you add it to the grocery list for the next time you happen to be out. This means that you don't have to buy 4 or 5 or 6 5-pound bags of flour when you're coastal cruising, because you're starting a 5-pound bag of flour, you've got one in reserve, you have time to find the next 5-pound bag of flour before you need it. It's a constant rotation of things. You also then don't have to worry about which one did I buy when, which one is the oldest one that I need to use up, which is definitely part of your world. If you're talking about stocking up for a super long time, you have to manage your stock and use up the things that you bought longer ago before you use up the things that you just bought. The other reason when you're coastal cruising and provisioning on the go the way you would be, it's a little bit more, I guess coastal cruising is almost a little bit more like living in a house where you're going to more consistently go to the grocery store. But when you are cruising and you're finding your grocery store and you're having to bring all the things back, if you're not having to stock up hard on heavy things all the time, it does make it easier to walk to the store and come back carrying the items that you have. But my suggestion when you're thinking about provisioning for a coastal cruise is to think about the fact that you don't have to buy nearly as much stuff. You definitely want to have your essentials on hand and have some plan for restocking, which to me means you have to identify your provisioning barometer. If you know you never want to run out of half and half, you have to figure out your plan for how often you need to go grocery shopping so you don't hit that awful point of not having creamer for your coffee. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you, and we can all share and laugh about our own individual provisioning barometers, because I bet yours might be different than mine. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. If you found it helpful, please don't forget to subscribe, tell your friends about us, and tune in next week because there will be a couple of them just for you. Have the most spectacular week.